You guys know Zork? You should. All right. Here we go. I came to Archaeo Gaming back in 2013 formally, where I was thinking, there are pots in games, this is amazing. You know, I was a pottery guy at the University of Missouri, and so seeing this stuff represented in various games, I'm like, I can do typologies in here, this is amazing. I was totally nerding out, right? And then I started to get a little more sophisticated, I hope, in how Archaeo Gaming actually works. So let's visit our friend the OED. Actually, parenthetical to this, the OCD. Whenever you see OCD, my first thought is Oxford Classical Dictionary, and you know you're a nerd when that's what you do. When I was looking at the definition of archaeology, it talks about history, but it doesn't say how long that history has to be. You know, in typical archaeology, you're dealing with dozens of years, hundreds of years, thousands of years. In games and archaeology, that kind of flies out the window. You know, I have a game that came out 2 years ago, and that's pretty old. You know, so I'm thinking about games in that kind of context. We're going to talk a little bit about time later. It's really been making my noodle. So when you're dealing with Archaeo Gaming specifically, you're looking at a couple of different layers of the game, and you have to treat these games, in my mind, as archaeological sites at the same time as you're treating them as archaeological artifacts. And you have to look at things at 2 or 3 levels at the same time as you're going through. So the first level, you're dealing with what I call game space. You're actually playing the game, and you're in the game, and you're interacting with the game stuff. And so, here, example, we've got architecture, and this is from the Elder Scrolls series, different games. So you've got you've got Oblivion, you've got Skyrim, you've got Elder Scrolls Online, and you're looking at the different kind of architecture. And in this case, you're dealing with the Dwemer's, and they never say Dwemer in the audio, so I can't really be sure how to pronounce that. But you look at the arches, and you look at all this stuff, and the design elements from game to game to game. The designers are pretty faithful to what makes a culture and how the culture identifies it in a built environment. So that's the first layer, and that's a very literal layer. The second layer is you're stepping one level up or one level back, and this is what I'm calling the game design layer. And so you're seeing, well, how's the resolution changing from title to title? How is it lit? How does the environment affect the narrative, and what's going on there? Are there glitches? And the answer is yes, especially in Elder Scrolls. They're really fun, and we'll take a look at those as well. And so you're dealing with this stuff too, because when you're doing the archaeology of a game, you're not just doing the archaeology of things that are represented in the game, but of the game itself. We're talking about iterations and versions. Do you guys know what this is? This is Troy. This is the site of Troy. And Troy's got, 12 levels, 7 levels, something like that? There's a lot of stuff. It's the same site. Troy, it embodies, it's Ilium, it's from Homer, and Schliemann's involved, and for better or worse. And so you've got these different levels that are all building themselves up over time. And you find that these kinds of levels are also present in these kinds of games. These are all different kinds of games. I just went on eBay. I'm like, well, how many different Skyrims are there, really? And so here they are. We've got the Legendary Edition for the PS3. We've got Skyrim for Xbox 360. We've got the Legendary Edition for the PC. And so you have all of these different iterations, from platform to platform to platform to platform. It's all Skyrim, but they all behave a little bit differently as you play. And you get different glitches and different environments and things like that too. So, how do you keep track of that typology? How do you keep track of those different levels over time? So, you're basically looking at this stacked narrative in a particular game or series of games, or even a single game that you can play different things. And I apologize for talking really fast, but I've got a lot of weird stuff to show you. And so you've got stuff like this too, which is crossover. And this is one of the things that really interests me in Archaeo Gaming as well. You've got the virtual and you've got the real, and they meet in the middle somewhere. And so you can buy editions where you get a model of stuff. You can have T-shirts. You can have coinage, that has actually been produced, and you can buy this stuff on Etsy. And so you've got this transition from virtual into the real into the back again. So you're contributing not only to the virtual archaeological record, but to the real archaeological record at the same time, which is kind of blowing my mind. What else? Well, when you think about games as sites have artifacts. And so what is an artifact in a video game context? Now, when I first started thinking about this, I'm like, well, I can do my little excavation in World of Warcraft, and I get a piece, from this Night Elf stuff, and I can put them together and get a final artifact that gives me a little mount, or some junk, or some things to sell to the vendor. But you also get things that are independent of the game action, or take you out of the game action, which are the glitches. You go in and the game behaves in a way that it was never intended to behave because you've done something weird. And then I'm like, well, what kind of glitches are there? And we can start to create a typology, because that's what archaeologists do, right? We think about stuff and we say, well, how do we organize this kind of stuff? And so using Skyrim examples, we have like flying things. This is a flying man. That doesn't happen in nature. It rarely happens in a game. And you know what happens with these glitches? They get fixed. So you have a glitch, it happens in a space and a time, and then it goes away because it gets reported and the developers do their thing. They're like, that glitch is bad, let's get rid of it. Uh-oh, it is now removed from the archaeological record, it becomes part of the archaeological record. So we have to record when it happened, where it happened, why it happened, and I'll show you how to record that in a minute. Other glitches we've got things stuck in stuff. This is another glitch, all right? We have landscape that should be there but is not there. So you've got glitches like this too. We have missing things, we've got model glitches as well. So you've got the NPCs walking around, and sometimes they have no faces. And Assassin's Creed Unity does this a lot. Probably the worst way, or maybe the best, depends on who you are. And so you've got something like this going on. And well, how do you control this stuff? Diablo 3, I only chose Diablo 3 because it's easier to see, well, not in this slide, what the versioning actually is. When you play a game, when you get that startup screen, and this is true when you're gaming like DOS, and when you're gaming now, is there's a version. There's usually a build number or a version number attached to the home screen or the launch screen that tells you what's going on. So when you're doing the archaeology of a particular video game, it's really important to say not only what game it is that you're playing, what version you're playing, and then also what's the build number, because builds change over time, or if a company pushes out a new release, that number changes, and so you need to record that when you're actually doing the archaeology of stuff. So here in Diablo 3, the beta is 0.4, then we go to 1.01.9558, by the way. And then we have the expansion pack, and we go into 2001, and then the build number is 19561. And so as you're recording things, especially with glitches or action that's happening within the game, when you're treating this as real media, you need to be sure that you're locking this in. So make sure you record that. I'm going to change gears for a minute, because when you think about archaeogaming and archaeology of video games, a lot of times people are thinking, well, there's old stuff in the game. There are ruins everywhere. Okay, fine. Granted. But what about older games? You guys know what this is? Who can identify this? Shift-Alt-2. This is an artifact. What does it do and where is it from? I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the archaeology of solitaire. This is not just solitaire. This is solitaire for Windows. And it's not just solitaire for Microsoft Windows. It's solitaire for Microsoft Windows XP. And this is really important, because this is the only place that you can get Shift-Alt-2 to do something. What does it do? Shift-Alt-2, when you bring this up, it finishes the game for you and makes that cascading animation of all the cards coming out. Oh my God, This is true. That XP was out for like 12 years. All right? So why is this here? How do we know about this? Who figured out that key code actually did that thing? And how did that become viral and then shared in the real world? So it's not like, walking around town. This is a very old place. And so, there's probably archaeology underfoot. We don't know. The archaeologists do. And so when you're dealing with archaeogaming, you get... Okay, awesome. That's a relief, actually. So the same thing is true with games. There's stuff lurking under the hood, with, or under the bonnet, of what's going on with these video games, and you have to just kind of pay attention and be aware of what's going on. And so, somebody exploited, this particular thing, and when you're dealing with solitaire, this is true of this version of solitaire, but if you play solitaire in Windows 10, which I do not recommend, you can prove that, it's gone. It's totally gone. There's other things that are coming in, like advertising and stuff. It's like, God, this is no good. But it kind of is, because it's another element to this particular version of solitaire, of this game that we know. So you can apply these kind of archaeological principles to other games that don't necessarily have intelligible archaeology in them. We have to get away from that kind of thinking, I think. So to that end, I wanted to talk a little bit about what I'm calling the No Man's Sky Archaeological Survey, which is a real thing, or it's going to be, as soon as the game launches in June. One of the things that really interests me is how especially procedural games generate stuff and why they generate stuff. And with No Man's Sky, I like to call it machine-created culture. That is to say that as you're going along, there are buildings that show up, or there are abandoned spaceships that show up. There's landscape that shows up that if you read it correctly, you can actually go in and find particular civilizations and whatnot. And so I wanted to, for the first time, when you're playing Skyrim, you're playing World of Warcraft or something like this, you're always really thinking about, it's kind of play in a way, because we know this stuff is here, we know why it's here, the designers know what's going on. In No Man's Sky, they kind of have an idea. Hello Games has sent out probes into the universe to try to figure out what's going on, but they're not entirely sure what they're going to find. They're building some worlds here. So in applying survey archaeology, and I've been taking a look at the Eastern Corinthia Archaeological Survey Project, which was done in the late 1990s in Greece. Also the PK Archaeological Project, which is a survey done in Cyprus. And using their methodologies in order to do a proper archaeological survey using real archaeological tools but within the game space. Starting with identification of systems, drilling down into orbiting planets to see if they're sustaining any kind of life or culture. And then finally, going in and identifying built structures or built environments within the game. And you can tag these, you can do geotags for revisiting later, so you can have different teams going out in different ways to find these kinds of things for other teams and people to come along behind. And they're recording this into the Atlas, and actually I show you the cover of my phone. Because, the Atlas, which is here. And what else you got going on? Eventually landing, exploring the environment, documenting what's going on. Because this didn't happen. This particular building wasn't there until you land the ship, and then all of a sudden the algorithms fire, and then you have stuff, and that stuff is important to explore. Some stuff has a writing on it. This is great. In an interview, Sean Murray said that even the languages are procedurally generated in this particular game. So you have archaeolinguistics, of a language that never existed before, yet follows some kind of morphology and phonology and all of these other really interesting things. And then you can actually talk to people, but you don't know what they're saying. And so, part of the game is actually trying to decipher this. And so we're actually able to do archaeogaming within a game of civilizations that are being created through math, that's really cooking my brain. And to take this one step further, I started thinking about time in games. And so we're calling stuff like this game time. You guys know what this is, right? This is a graphical representation of the special theory of relativity by Einstein, right? Where basically it's saying we're moving in time and space simultaneously, and here's the past, here's the future, and we're now at this point of now, and we can go anywhere, within that particular point. So how does that apply to a video game? Well, you can think of that space where the future, where the future meets the past, as being the singularity of the access to the game from the console. You're leaving this particular space, you're inhabiting it passively at that point, and you're going in and you're becoming an active participant in a virtual world, in a virtual environment, where you're engaging in a different kind of time, in a different kind of space, all at the same time while you're existing what I call meatspace. So you've got virtual space, which is metaspace, and you've got the real space, which is meatspace, because we're made of meat. And that's a shout out to Neuromancer by William Gibson. And so you're dealing with this kind of physics. What does this mean? You have see me at lunch if you have questions. But basically, you have a line of time, which is real time, where you're basically moving forward, and that arrow of time never changes. You enter a game space through the singularity of your login. That time is arced. And you know how black holes bend space-time, so that parallel lines meet? That's exactly what's happening when you enter a game and when you leave a game. You're following a curved space and time, and when those lines intersect with access to that virtual space, you get these kinds of singularities. So you're basically making your own black hole through your login when you play Xbox. Maybe. As far as how you perceive time, this is interesting too. Time kind of bends and is a little weird, but when you're playing in the virtual space, it seems to be kind of linear, and that's when you're playing a game like Skyrim or something, and you're actually moving, and your character's moving. And there's a mod called Reading Takes Time. I don't know if you've seen this, where if you read a book, it actually takes like 10 minutes to read a book, and it affects the game as opposed to just clicking through and saying, "Yeah, I read this book," and it goes to your inventory. Well, how else does this time differ in games? And the reason why I'm bringing up all this stuff about time is because that's what archaeology is. You're dealing with time. And when you're dealing with archeo games, when you're dealing with archaeology in video games, you need to understand how time is affecting archaeological context. You're dealing with a piece of media, so that time is actually giving you key information about archaeological context that you need to integrate into how you're describing things. In game time, you save a game, time stops. Then it starts up again. That never happens in real life. When you hit a game death, sometimes permadeath, things stop. We don't know if that happens to us, but it certainly happens in a game. You also have these divisions in time, which allow you to have split realities. I get to a point where I can choose A or B, and I can do both, at separate times. And so you can see the divergence of the arrows of time there too. And then you're talking about layer. You recognize this toy? Yes, I'm calling this the inception model of game space, where you start off in meatspace, you go into the game into metaspace, you're dealing with real time in metaspace first, and then game time as to how the game actually affects time, and then the final layer is relative game time. So in like No Man's Sky, you're dealing with planets that orbit in different ways, they have different rotation, they have a different revolution. So those planets have time that are different from other planets in that same game, which is a different time, which is happening in another time in real space, and it gets really confusing, but you need to keep track of that stuff. I'm not going to read the slide to you, but I'll make this available afterwards because I'm out of time myself. But in any case, it's important to understand that when you're dealing with archaeogaming and you're dealing with archaeology insights, that there is this kind of context of time that you need to maintain that information. And I'm out of time, so.
We have a couple of minutes for some questions.
Okay.
Go to the back first, and then I'll get on.
I was wondering that you were talking about collecting glitches and select like different parts or different versions of video games,
Yes.
but you called it archaeology. Why don't you call it just archiving? Or could you perhaps say that at games you can find intersection between archaeology, archiving, and perhaps history?
Yeah, I think, archaeology is always dependent on other disciplines to help inform it. It's always, I'll call it cross-platform for the analogy, but it's a very cooperative, collaborative space, so, we have to deal, when we're dealing with archivists, they're specialists now for archiving video games. As physical artifacts, for example. You see this like with Rayford Gwynn at SUNY Stony Brook. He helps out with the Strong Museum of Play, for example, and their video game collection. And being able to keep the game within the context of hardware that is used to play the game. So if I play an Atari game, I need to make sure that I have a 2600 or 2600 emulator that's using the cartridge, or like a Java emulation of that particular game, and being able to keep that in play. I don't know how glitches are being archived, if at all, with the exception of players who save this on their YouTube or their Twitch channel saying, isn't this rad that we found this particular glitch, isn't this hilarious? And that's where it stops. But I'm going back and saying, no, wait, this is really important. So I don't know yet how this kind of archiving is supposed to be happening, or who's going to do it. And if the developers are keeping this as part of their development logs, and how we can work with the developers in order to get access to that kind of information. One of the workshops tomorrow is about building a dialogue between developers and archaeologists, and that's one of the questions that I'd love to see answered. And to get access to that kind of corporate data. I'll probably have to sign an NDA or something, but I'll do it. Yeah.
I was wondering about, you were talking about time and how time sort of skips back and forth when you save a game.
Yeah.
There is quite a couple of online games, especially other games, which have this offline game feature, as they would call it. And especially when you talk about archaeological time progression in an archaeological game, maybe something like this offline game system would allow time to progress even if you would have game death, or even if you would have shut down the game and then you start it up again, and suddenly time did progress.
That happens in some of the games like Eve Online, for example. You log out and the Empire is still going, and you come back in and you're like, what? What happened to my stuff? What happened to the Empire? And so we have that happening, as well. And if you read like Thomas Covenant, the Unbeliever, he comes back to the real world and he goes back in, and then all of a sudden, hundreds of years have passed and things have changed, and so you're dealing with that particular stuff. I'm hoping this happens in like No Man's Sky, because it's interesting to see how time is affected from log in to log out. Is time accelerated in that, or do cultures evolve? If I visit a planet and then I come back a year later and visit that same planet, what's changed? Has it evolved, and if so, how? And that's one of the reasons why I want to do this survey, is so I can identify this planet, so we can always come back year after year to see what's changing. Yeah, but I don't know if that answers the question, but it's certainly something that's on our mind.
sure, and other people have written about game time. It's very complicated beyond my ability. But what a question I had about Troy. Love that about Troy. My understanding is he found the layer of Troy, he went down past it and chose the wrong layer. I could be wrong. But for a non-archaeologist, it might be really fascinating is this layer of soil, how many stones down is another era, and how would you visualize that?
Yeah, I don't know. I think we have to start with the artifact at that particular level. You know, I found something, where is it? And then see if I can identify if it's happening in previous versions of the game, if I've got access to those. Yeah, with Schliemann, and this is true of a lot of archaeologists, specifically dealing like digging in the early 20th century, is that they would blow past Venetian stuff, and they blow past the early Christian stuff to get down to the good stuff, which is the classical, right? You want to get into the classical period, because that's really cool. I'm not advocating that practice whatsoever, but that's how it was done. They did, you know, context artifacts everywhere. It was a big mess. And so Schliemann was doing that too. And for us, you know, I think we play with the game that we were given, and then when we identify stuff, we can then go forward in time or backwards in time in a particular game in order to identify presence and absence and location. And in the case of the glitch, what activity happened to actually trigger this particular thing.
I'm sorry, we have to
Okay.
move on. But
I'll see
we're
what
going to have
Greg
a discussion time later, so save your questions, please.
Okay.
For later.